Hello, welcome to yet another episode of Varsity360. I'm Columbian sports editor Micah Rice, joined by Will Denner. Will, your first time on the podcast this year, so
great to be back.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot of momentum going with our episodes so far. In fact, last week's episode, which discussed whether Skyview and Columbia River should keep playing their annual rivalry football game, our most viewed episode to date. We had a ton of feedback, both through our social media channels and also just people emailing and reaching out to us. So glad to hear you're listening, you're involved in the conversation, and you're interested in supporting high school sports around Southwest Washington. So we're going to do something a little different today. We're going to take a break from football and give some spotlight to the other sports that are going on during the fall, namely soccer and volleyball. Girls soccer, obviously a lot of success recently in the area. Columbia River winning the state title at the Class 2A level last year. So why don't we just jump right into it, Will? You've had a chance to kind of do a little research and go out and see some of the games this fall. Obviously, the theme of the last few years has been the 2A Greater St. Helens League. That seems to be, year in, year out, the most competitive league, perhaps, in the state. And that seems to be no different this year, with 4 teams that might have a solid claim to chasing the league title this year.
Absolutely. So, as you said, River wins their 5th state title last fall. They returned this year with a little younger group. They have some returners like Ava Esslinger, a senior forward who's committed to Western Washington. But as I said, they get a lot younger. 5 freshmen on varsity, which you don't see a lot really at any level. And that coincides with 2 teams that I believe who are going to take a step forward this year in both Ridgefield and Hawkinson. First of all, Ridgefield, both those programs were also state Final Four teams in 2021 and 2019 along with River. For Ridgefield, it really starts on defense this year. They return center back Ava Kruckenberg, who's a senior. She was one of, I believe, 4 players who missed last year with ACL injuries, but she comes back, and they have a really strong back line so far. They held a strong Tumwater team to just 1 goal last week. Team that came in averaging, I believe, 6 goals in every game. So Ridgefield's one team to take a look at. And then Hawkinson, they only graduated 1 senior from last year's group. And if you remember, they actually made the state quarterfinals last year as a 16 seed, upsetting number 1 seed Fife, which you don't see a whole lot. So that group is back. Abby Dombrow, senior midfielder, is one to keep an eye on. She's committed to Weber State. They have a really deep senior class right now. Also have captains like Ashley Suva, Sophia Broughton, Ani Vossler. So they should be a formidable group this year. And can't sleep on R.A. Long either, up north. So they actually finished 2nd in the 2A GSHL last year. They have already played Hawkinson and Ridgefield this year, split the 2 last week, and they have Catherine Chapin, who's a great dynamic senior forward. She was actually named the 2A GSHL Offensive Player of the Year last year. So that team should be great as well. They're still looking for their first state playoff win in program history, but they're knocking on the door as well.
Yeah, I think we kind of... when you take a step back, you kind of realize like how rare this is, that over the last 5 years or so, it's like, well, it's the 2A GSHL not just making deep runs in state, but having 3 out of the Final 4 teams, which has happened with Ridgefield, Columbia River, and Hawkinson in recent years. Columbia River, obviously a state powerhouse for a long time, like you said, 5 state titles. But it wasn't long ago that Ridgefield, they made the state final game with Taryn Reese, who went on to play at University of Portland. And so just the longevity of the success among the 2A programs down here is really something to salute.
Absolutely. And yeah, iron has always sharpened iron down here. And it seems like even last year, there was kind of a feeling that the seeding was a little low in the state round, and even when you put a team like Tumwater in that District 4 as well, it's always a tough group, and it would not be surprising, I think, to see 2, perhaps 3, even again in the state Final Four, and even River team, like we said, that is a little bit on the younger side. head coach Philly Afenigus is one of the best in the business, and his staff, and they should be playing at their best by the end of the season. And like I said, with the other three, I think they all have a legitimate chance to make a deep playoff run this year.
Yeah, with Columbia River, I'm really interested to see who kind of steps into that role that Andy Buckley occupied last year. She ended up being our all-region player of the year. Just really the engine that made that team go. And so opportunities for some young players to really take that next step. And I'll be curious to see who does take on that mantle.
Absolutely.
Let's go on to the 3A. I had a chance to check out Prairie and Mountain View the other week, and if that game is any preview, it's going to be a very competitive league season in the 3A GSHL. On that night, it was the first night of league play. Mountain View scores twice within the first 10 minutes. Prairie gets a goal back in the 13th minute and then scores again late in the first half. It just shows, I think, how wide open that league is, not only between those two teams, but whether Kelso, who I spoke with both coaches afterwards, they both expect Kelso to possibly have a shout at a league title, but then also don't count out Evergreen. They returned the league MVP in Adrian Agbagnani.
Yep.
And so when you have that much depth across the board in a 5-team league, every night is going to be pretty crucial for seeing how those standings shake out.
Absolutely. And when you look at Mountain View, they, I believe, won the league last year. They were able to make it to state for the first time since 2019. They actually beat Kelso in a winner to state district game to get there. And a lot of their core comes back between forwards Lauren Krith, Tegan Irvin, but then even on the midfield line of Audrey Dizon and Olivia Sweet, they're all back, and they were all first-team all-league players last year.
Yeah, anytime you have 4 first-team all-leaguers back, 3 of whom are seniors. This senior class, I spoke with Thunder coach Dustin Johnson after that game, and he basically said, I tell the seniors every year, this is your year to make it what you want. And he had no doubt that with the dedication and the talent and the drive that that senior core has, that the Thunder are going to be a team that is looking to make some noise this year. But Prairie, I mean, they stuck with them, and I was most impressed with midfielder Madison Thorson, who really, you talk about someone who's kind of in the middle of everything that's going on. She can go forward on an attack. She can drop back and help on the defense, and she can set up her forwards in a way that I think makes Prairie offensively a very dangerous team this year.
And Prairie head coach Ryan Glazer, you spoke to after that match as well, and he had some very strong things to say about her as well, calling her the leader on and off the pitch, and even occasionally being double and triple teamed, and it doesn't seem to faze her in any way.
No, and that's where you can see that at the high school level. I mean, I think so many of these players, they play at such a high level on the club team that they're used to being constantly under pressure, being constantly in a position where they have to, work out of tight spots, that when you see them in a high school competition, it really opens the play for a player to really dominate and show kind of a little bit of flair and skill. And I think you get that with several of the players down here.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's go on to the 4A. Camas has traditionally been the powerhouse down here. But this year's Camas team, I think, really their success will depend on their midfield.
Absolutely, yeah. It starts with Parker Mayers, a senior center midfielder who, just to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain, was very close to being an all-region player for us last year, but was part of a really loaded Camas squad that had 3 other seniors on that team. But she's back for her senior year. She's committed to Colorado Mesa University, where teammate and last year's goalkeeper Keely Zorick also plays. But it's not just her. That midfield group also includes Sage McCusker, Abby Doyle, and Paige Curl. And it's going to be the key to this year's group. And they've been at the top of the league for several years. They won the state title in 2021. They made it to the quarterfinals last year, and maybe there's some bigger question marks for this year's group, but until proven otherwise, they're the team to beat in that league.
I think you could make the argument with so many talented groups of midfielders around Clark County that Camas, they might have an argument of being the best. I mean, anytime you
Absolutely.
have Parker Mares in there kind of leading the show, I think that that puts that core among any of that you'll see here as far as being the top.
For sure, yeah. And again, it starts with Mares. She had 13 goals and 6 assists last year. She's equally comfortable kind of being their top scoring option. She has been for them so far this year, but can be kind of on the distributing end as well. And this midfield group looks really strong top to bottom.
It's tempting to go through the 2As, the 3As, the 4As, and maybe not give as much attention to the 1As, but we can't do that here because you might have the best player in the whole county at the 1A level,
Yeah.
and that's Shayla Bradley, La Center. Obviously, she's a very accomplished club player, travels all over the country for soccer. Just how good, in your opinion, is Shayla Bradley?
Well, I can quote one Trico League coach who called her a generational talent among Clark County soccer players, and I think she's backed that up not only at the high school level but the club level as well. She plays in the Portland Thorns Academy, and this past club season she was actually just named the ECNL Girls Northwest Player of the Year, so that's incredibly high praise to have that kind of honor, not even just for the state of Washington or Oregon, the entire Northwest, to be named the Player of the Year. So she, like you said, has had a very accomplished career, and she goes into the season, perhaps one of the best in the area, if not the state.
Yeah, because La Center, it'll be interesting to see how far she can take them this year.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I mean, they haven't quite had the postseason success yet. They were knocked out by a really good Seton Catholic team last year in the district winner to state game, and they lost in the I believe it was the first round of the 1A state tournament in 2021. So it hasn't quite translated to team success yet, but interestingly, they did kind of shake things up this year. They got a new head coach and Horst Malinat. I hope I'm saying that right. But he's got a lot of success coaching in the area. He coached at Clark College previously, Skyview, Centralia College. He comes into that program and hopefully they can take that next step this year.
yeah, so always exciting when Friday nights are all about football, but the rest of the week can be about the other kind of football because the talent level is consistently high down here in Southwest Washington. But another sport where the talent level has also been consistently high, and that's volleyball.
Yeah.
And I gotta think we gotta start with looking at the two-time defending Class 2A state champion Columbia River Rapids, and I got a chance to go out and see them early this year, a rivalry game against Skyview, but I left with the impression that of the two previous state championship winning teams, this year's team might even be better.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it starts obviously with Lauren Dreves and Sydney Dreves, the Auburn commit being Lauren, obviously. But then another interesting part of that is they've had now 3 starting setters in 3 years. This year it's going to be Macy McCoy. I'm just curious, what were your impressions of her and how she's stepping into that starting role so far?
Oh, very impressed. I mean, there's something about the setter position in volleyball. It kind of goes, unless you're really deep in the weeds in it, it can go unnoticed, but there's something about the way Columbia River and Lauren Dreves especially elevates the setter in that team and how the setter sets literally her up for success.
Right.
I think it's no coincidence that this is the third setter in 3 years that Lauren Dreves has had. Both of those previous 2 setters went on to garner state awards and go on to play at college. 2 years ago, it was Carolyn Hansen, who, as a senior, was really kind of the vocal and emotional leader of that first state championship team in this current run. She now plays for Western Washington. She graduates. In comes senior Sophie Warden. She no let off at that position, giving Lauren and Sydney Dreves the service that they need to really have that 2-pronged attack at the net. She now plays college at for collegiately at the NAIA level at Montana Western. So in comes Macy McCoy. Again, no drop off. In fact, she might end up being even better than any of those setters. That's just kind of the poise and the control and the athleticism that she has. I talked with her after that Skyview match, and she said it really helped in that she knew last year as a junior that she was going to be the heir apparent to that position. So even though she wasn't the setter on last year's championship team, she worked it in practice. She got that chemistry. She had, a deep friendship with Lauren Dreves. Obviously club connections and everything like that. But there was just no drop off that I saw. And so Columbia River, no surprise, they're number one in the first coaches poll to come out, and they will be the favorite. But you don't have to look far to see another team in Ridgefield that would love to knock off the Rapids like Ridgefield did in the district championship last year.
And that was River's only loss last year, if I remember right. So
only loss last year. If it weren't for a team called Columbia River, we could be talking about the two-time defending state champion Ridgefield Spudders, because they are seeking this year their third consecutive berth in the state championship game. And with a talent as good as Lizzie Andrew, the Stanford commit, 6'5", big presence at the net, not only as a blocker but also on attack. The Spudders, if things go their way, they can beat anybody in the state.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it starts with Lizzie Andrew, but what else do you like about that team and them kind of potentially being able to challenge River again?
Well, it's just they always have players step up at the positions that are kind of the blue collar positions. They've always had great liberos. They've always had great setters. Paige Stefaniak, she graduated, plays at Portland State now. It's always been that kind of supporting cast. You've had the Andrews come through. That family, ton of talent. With the oldest sister there playing at Baylor now. It's always just sort of like it is at Columbia River, where they reload, and I'll be very interested to see, not only in league play but also district play and then state play, where those two programs paths cross and who ends up on top.
For sure. So obviously those two get a lot of attention around here at statewide for good reason, but there's also Camas at the 4A level. They've been again at the top of the 4A GSHL for a few years running now, and have had some state success, but even last year came up just short of actually being able to place at state. But do you think it's possible they take another step this year and possibly get to that placing stage of state?
Well, definitely. I mean, the mayor's last name keeps popping up, because you have Parker Mayers on the soccer team and Kendall Mayers on the volleyball team, and she's regarded as one of the top prospects or one of the top recruits in her class. She's going to be a junior this year. Mm-hmm. And she's getting a lot of looks from different colleges, and I think anytime you have her in the mix, again surrounded by a solid core, which you have Hallie Ryder coming back, giving them some very good agility and athleticism at the libero position, and so I look for Camas to definitely be a contender to leave the state tournament with a trophy this year.
And it's not just the 4As. I mean, at the 3A level, when you look at Prairie and Kelso, both are undefeated so far. Kelso has already claimed a couple wins over 4A programs Skyview and Union, and Prairie was last year's league champion. So they've traded the last two. Do you think that Prairie can challenge Kelso again at the top of this league?
That's the story of the 3A GSHL again. The coaches tend to like Kelso. Sorry. So we talk so much about Camas, it just pops up in there. But Kelso is ranked number 3 statewide in the first rankings that were released. And I think Kelso, they surprised some people last year at state. They had to go through the consolation bracket and by district to make it, and then once they got there, they caught fire and ended up with a 7th place trophy. Prairie, like you said, was the league champion last year, but they graduated the league MVP Ella Conklin, so it's going to be up the next class step up, and I think that's led by returning first team all-leaguer Diamond Dutrieve. I hope I said that right.
Yep.
But that's the question. Can Prairie kind of replace a league MVP and maintain that high standard? So far they have, but we'll really learn a lot once Kelso and Prairie actually get on the court.
Absolutely. And also not to be forgotten is Emmeline Cecil, another first-team All-Leaguer for Prairie, strong backline player who should play a big role for the Falcons this year.
Definitely. So I think that's it's always so interesting just to see like the evolution of, you have the favorites when we start the year,
Yep.
but then who might surprise. And today you got out to see Mountain View and Evergreen pretty early on. What was your impression of that, and kind of maybe someone who might be lurking in the 3A GSHL?
Absolutely. Well, that was an interesting matchup because Mountain View and Evergreen actually tied for third in this league last year, and they ended up playing a tiebreaker game, which Mountain View ended up claiming in 5 sets to go to the bi-district playoffs. And again, between the two this year, it looked to be a battle early. They split the first 2 sets of that season opening match before Mountain View kind of took off and ended up prevailing in a 3-1 win. They're led by McKenna Gamby, who's really the total engine of that offense. She's a setter, but she's also an outside hitter and can play the right side as well. Their head coach, Jacqueline Holmes, joked that they kind of kid with McKenna about when she wakes up, she just says volleyball because she loves the sport so much. So she's somebody to look at. She was another first-team All-Leaguer in that class last year. And then on Evergreen, they've come a long way after a couple winless seasons, but they have an interesting class of seniors as well. Alexis Eccles is a great hitter at the net, can play the block pretty well too. And then they also have another senior in libero, Aaliyah Bennett, who stepped in for Josie Snyder last year, who was kind of a big player in this league as well. So those two can hang around, and even Heritage, all of those teams can compete, and on the right night can give those two top teams fits as well. So.
Well, we are in the thick of the 2023 fall sports season, and I'm glad we were able to, obviously the football season has started with a few different storylines and some wackiness, and we've already had an upset in the 2A Greater St. Helens League football with Woodland knocking off Washougal, showing that Woodland is a legitimate league title contender up there, along with possibly Ridgefield. And we're going to learn a lot about whether Hudson's Bay is among the top of that league, because they face Ridgefield this Friday.
Yeah.
But always time to give a little shout out to the other sports, soccer, volleyball. The talent, like I said before, the talent level has been so high down here in recent years that it gives us a lot to follow, a lot to write about, and a lot of athletes to shout out and follow as they chase their state and league championship goals.
For sure. Yeah, it's already mid-September, and we're already looking forward to how it's going to play out the rest of the way.
All right. Like always, continue to follow us on 360preps.com, whether it's football, volleyball, soccer, cross country. We'll be here, soon enough. That's the first state championship to get going. But as always, follow us on 360preps.com, and we'll see you next week.